Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this AI Power Grid AIPG project webinar. This webinar highlights OpenAI GPTs and the GPT store, the retrieval augmented generation RAG technology that makes it all possible, and the LangChain framework for creating your own local GPTs. Questions about previous sections of this presentation will be fielded between segments. The total length of today's webinar is projected for around 1 hour of time. To those of you watching live on the AIPG Discord, thank you for your attendance. Please keep your chat participation and questions on topic and follow Discord terms of service and server rules. To those of you watching the recording of this webinar later on YouTube, thank you for your attention. AI Power Grid strives to stake an ambitious claim of substantial territory in the ever-expanding sea of AI development amidst its global implementation. We look forward to your company on this endeavor. I am today's initial speaker. I am a moderator on the AIPG Discord where I go by Switchgrass. And without further ado, I will now give the floor to core team member, the full LLM stack, or the LLM full stack engineer, who on Discord goes by JoJo. Welcome, JoJo.
Thank you, Switch, and hello, everybody. So it's good to see a lot of familiar faces from the first webinar where we learned about what language models were. And today I'm excited to share with you guys some of the things I've learned on building with large language models and just the main ideas based around this. So on the agenda today, we're first going to discuss a newly released product by OpenAI, the GPTs and the GPT store. And then we're going to delve into how you can create these GPTs on your own local system using access to custom knowledge and tools and fine-tuning. The focus is going to be around access to custom knowledge, but we will touch on the main ideas behind tool usage and fine-tuning. So the GPTs and the GPT store was announced a couple months ago, and I believe it was released a few weeks ago. I believe it is still in a beta version, but I may be wrong about that. But what it allows you to do is essentially just build on top of the base version of ChatGPT and add your own twists and tricks to the mix. So one of the ones I kind of like is, I don't know if you guys are into coloring, but this is a coloring book, GPT, and basically you can type in something like dinosaur on a cloud, and what happens here is it just, as expected, creates a coloring book image of what you asked for. So what's going on behind the hood is the guy who created this essentially just gave it a really good prompt that kind of takes our image and turns it into what we're about to see. So yeah, pretty good, and pretty good if you have a child who's into coloring. But that was a very simple example. There's actually a lot of things you can do here, and we're going to create our own today. And we're going to create one that some of you may be familiar with on the server, which is an AI that has access to the AIPG documents and allows you to chat with it. So I'm just going to get this. So the cool thing about creating your own GPTs is that they have a nice interface where you can kind of ask what you wanted to create. And it sets up a lot of the groundwork for you. So while that's happening, let's just look into the configurations. You can give it a name, description. But over here, the instructions are quite important because this is basically its system prompt and tells it what it's going to be doing, what it should avoid, and how it should behave. So this stuff is going to get filled automatically based on that simple message we put in there. And over here, we have some key features. So one is the knowledge base where you can upload your own files and have access to that via chat. And the other three are like web browsing, an image generator, and code interpreter, but we don't need any of that. And finally, there's actions, which is what I mentioned earlier, also known as tool usage. And over here, the possibilities are quite endless. You could connect it to an airplane API and have it book your flights for you, connect it to your shopping app, have it do shopping for you. So I'm just going to upload a file quickly, the AIPG um, information. So this will have information about our team and whatnot. And I'm just going to ask it a basic question just to show that it works. So yeah, as you guys heard, I'm JoJo, and in the documentation that I just uploaded, this was stated, and it is correct. Yeah, I'm from South Africa. So yeah, just a brief rundown on what GPTs are, and I would encourage some of you guys, if you have a subscription, just go try it out on your own and see what you can create. It's pretty fun to play around with. But the main idea for this webinar is that we kind of want to learn how we can create these GPTs locally on our own system and recreate these building blocks. So there are two main ideas here. The first one is access to custom knowledge, and this is either done through fine-tuning or retrieval augmented generation, which we'll go into in a bit. And the second thing you need, tool usage. And I just discussed earlier that, yeah, you can pretty much do anything with tools. So for knowledge retrieval, one of the techniques used is fine-tuning. So from our previous webinar, we learned that base LLMs are created through an extensive pre-training process where terabytes or petabytes of data are fed into the model and it learns basic patterns from this text. And this is quite an extensive process, costs millions of dollars, and not really suitable for the casual user to do at home. And if we wanted to get our own personal or domain-specific data set into this LLM, redoing this whole pre-training process is just inefficient. So a method in machine learning known as fine-tuning is where we just put in these documents into the already created base LLM and change some of the weights, and we get out a fine-tuned LLM. That is quite the big oversimplification, but that's the essential idea around it. And this does take a fair amount of resources, but in the end, it is still an efficient route and could cost as little as $10 to about $1,000, depending on your use case. However, for the for the case of information retrieval, fine-tuning isn't always the best route. Generally, what's recommended is that when you're fine-tuning an LLM, it's not a very good idea to fine-tune it for data retrieval because, as you know, these LLMs still have the bad. Sorry, 1 second. I just need to check something. Okay, guys, I'm back. Sorry, just had to deal with something IRL. So yeah, as you know, these LLMs have the bad habit of hallucinating, and fine-tuning doesn't correct this process. So even if you give it a bunch of information, it's still prone to getting questions wrong if asked on the topic. However, I will say that fine-tuning does have its pros, especially when you're looking for a certain structure of output. For example, if you're fine-tuning a model specifically for calculation or coding or returning output in a specific JSON format. But for the case of information retrieval, we use a system known as retrieval augmented generation. And this process is basically taking a question, first giving it to a database, which semantically finds the most similar pieces of text related to your question, and feeds both of those into the prompt, which goes into the LLM and gives you a final answer. The main idea that you guys need to understand here is the whole retrieval system. And that is essentially done through what's known as an embedding model. Now, there are tons of these, and we'll look at the leaderboard in a moment, and we'll even go through some coding examples of them. But essentially, what happens here is that objects or strings or images go into the embedding model, and what we get out are these vectors, which are essentially just a list of numbers. And the cooler thing here is that we can represent these vectors in a multi-dimensional space that looks something kind of like this. And the main idea is that similar words will be closer together, such as man and woman, because they're both um, genders, I guess, would be somewhere here, and pizza would be somewhere over here. And king or prince or queen would be here. And yeah, essentially similar words would be closer together. And the second cool thing about these vectors is that we can kind of do mathematical operations on them, and they would behave somewhat as you would expect doing operations on the English words, such as king minus adult plus child. If you turn those into embedding vectors and subtracted and added child, you would get the approximate vector of prince, which is pretty interesting. So yeah, how do we actually store these in a database? The first thing we do is we load them in and split them into chunks. And then each of those chunks goes into the embedding model and gets turned into a vector, and that gets put into a vector database. And then we go back to our whole system of asking the question and first retrieving the relevant info, and finally putting that into the LLM and getting an answer. All right, so that was a pretty complex thing to digest. So before we head into the code of how to actually do this, does anyone have any questions?
Okay, so the floor is open to questions. Feel free to raise your hand or type your questions in the chat. We'll address a few of them, and then we'll move on to the next section. Just got one person typing. No hands. Looks like no questions. Okay, let's move on.
Okay, great. So let's go into the code. So to code this out, we're going to be using a framework known as LangChain. And I've pasted the docs into the code. So if you guys are looking through it, you're welcome to read kind of how to do it yourself, or kind of a bit more information on what I've done if that doesn't make sense. And I don't really like using LangChain when working on more complex tasks, but for getting started, I think it abstracts a lot of it has a lot of the useful tools that you'd need when developing with LLMs, and makes things a lot easier to find and everything in one place. So I'm just going to install some of the dependencies. And yeah, let's have a look at the code. Okay, so the first thing that happens here is that we're going to load in the AIPG TXT, which just has the information about our project. And then we call a text splitter from LangChain and split it up into chunks of size 500 with an overlap of 50. And I'll kind of go into what that means in a bit. I'm just going to check that I'm just going to upload the document quickly. Okay, cool. So this is a small chunk of what I just uploaded. And as you saw before, we split it up into chunks of 500. So just assuming this is around 500 characters, you would think that it would get chunked here, but it doesn't, because we're not using a regular splitter. We're using something known as a recursive character text splitter. Now that sounds a bit complicated, but the main reason for this is that we want to keep embeddings to have their semantic meaning. So we don't want to break sentences up in half and have this be one embedding where this is another, because it doesn't make a lot of sense just to us in general. However, with the recursive splitter, it's a more intelligent splitter and splits things based on paragraphs and sentences. So sentences will first split things based on each paragraph. So each of these will get split, even if it is less than 500 characters. The only time that comes into play is if we split up, say, this into one paragraph, but it is more than 500 characters, then it will get broken down into two more chunks at a sentence point, such as over here. So that's just so we can keep the integrity of the meaning of the sentences and paragraphs. And then we are going to create the embedding database. So this is using an open source embedding model known as BGE. If you look at the leaderboard, that one is on the list at 10th place, which is pretty good. OpenAI's embedding was actually below that, but I think they came out with a new one recently, Text Embedding 3, and they're currently at 5th place. But the top 4 embedding models are still all OpenAI, so that's pretty cool. However, there's not a lot of difference between these models, and so the main reason I go for this one is just the ratio of its size to its performance is quite good. You could go for the best, but it would require a ton of VRAM. So yeah. So this process here, these 2 steps, just kind of loaded all those text documents that we split up and puts them into this vector database. And now we're going to set up our prompt for the AI model. So if we look over here, it's a pretty basic prompt. You are an assistant for a question answering tasks. Use the following pieces of retrieved information to answer the question concisely. And over here, we have a placeholder for the question, and we have the context, which is where the retrieved data goes into. And now over here, we're going to set up what's called a retrieval QA chain, which is kind of what LangChain is known for. It uses these things called chains, which this essentially handles everything for us. It takes in an LLM and basically gets the data from our database automatically, and all we have to do is kind of invoke it. So anyway, I've asked it a question, which team member is from South Africa, and I'm kind of just going to invoke that and just format out the answer into a nice form. So let's just kind of see. All right, so it got the answer correct. The team member from South Africa is JoJo, a large language model engineer, correct. Now, another benefit to this whole system compared to using fine-tuning is that we can also show the sources and verify that our answer is correct based on the source documents. And that's another way to fight against hallucination. So yeah, over here we printed out the actual sources, and the first one is the piece of text relating to my information, which you can see in the original text document over here. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. And does anyone have another question you want to ask it?
Let's see. Short question. Anybody got one for the AI? Anything you're dying to know?
Just keep in mind, this is a subset of information for the AIPG project. It's not everything. That would have taken a bit longer to convert into a database, but yeah.
I don't see any questions.
Okay, cool.
Half might have
So yeah,
one.
sorry.
No, I was gonna have you ask it to relate AI power grid to the traditional power grid of the early 19th century. Is that
Okay.
all right?
Let me just see. I don't think it has like some general info about that. I just have team info, so I don't think it's gonna answer that quite well. But let me try it. All right, so I mean, this is cool. It mentioned that it wasn't explicitly mentioned in the provided information. However, it does say we are a project that focuses on democratizing AI and utilizes blockchain, so that's correct. And yeah, I'd say this is a pretty good answer. It gives the user access to further information. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And you can kind of see some of the source documents it retrieved. So these are the first. This was the most relevant one, and it usually just returns 4 documents. However, you can set it to retrieve more or less. But yeah, this is a good time to just have questions in general, if anyone has any.
Floor is open again to questions. Raise your hand if you have one to ask and would like to speak, or type it into the chat. Looks like we have one in the chat. Nathan L asks, are you able to share that Google project IPYNB so we can experiment with our own files?
Yeah, definitely. I will share this with you guys once the webinar is over.
Thank you. Anyone else? No takers.
Okay, awesome. So this system that I built up here is a very naive RAG, meaning it's pretty much using the most basic setup, where we just retrieve the 4 most relevant documents. Also, the chunking process is very basic. We just chunk based on 500 characters and paragraphs. However, for more complex data, you would want to work on that a lot more. There's a bunch of things you can do, like using a different retrieval method or having an LLM generate 4 more queries based on your initial query, and having that each of those queries return different sources. However, I do want to plan that for a future webinar where we focus specifically on RAG and how we can make it better and improve on it, and pros and cons. But I hope some of you guys get a chance to play with this and before the next webinar. So what's next on the agenda? Tool usage. So let me just go into full screen. Okay, so the main idea around tool usage, this is a kind of a paper that I'm referencing known as React, which is a framework that we use when creating the steps that a model uses to access tools. Bit of a bad name because it's similar to the front-end framework React. However, let's just look at this example. So 7 Brief Lessons on Physics was written by an Italian physicist that worked in France since what year? So this is quite an obscure question, and no surprise that the LLM hallucinated an incorrect answer as 1986. I don't even think I know the answer to this. And then we kind of asked the LLM to reason about it, and it still gives us a wrong answer. So let's give it access to some tools. Specifically, a good tool here would be Wikipedia. And the process we're going to use is essentially the query goes into an LLM. Over here, it's just called an agent. You'll also see that a lot in papers. And first, the agent will have a thought to itself, and that thought will then prompt the usage of a tool, which will then return an output, which the LLM will read. And it may need to use a tool again, and it has that ability to kind of loop around and continuously use the same tool before it gives the okay to send the answer to the user. So let's see that in practice. Now this is first when we only allow it to act on a tool and not really think on its action. So its first step is to search for the book on Wikipedia, and it gets results. And over here we see it says, okay, just some information about the book. And then it does the action again, and it gets some more information on the book, but nothing about the years. And so all we get back is that another incorrect answer. However, if we give it the ability to think to itself first, it can first determine a game plan. So it says, I need to search for 7 brief lessons on physics, find its author, and then when the author has, and find when the author has worked in France since. So its first search is the book, and from there it retrieves the author's name. And then it has a second thought. The author of 7 Brief Lessons is Carlo Rovelli. I need to search this guy and find when he has worked in France since. So now it changes the search strategy to the author and gets a bunch of information. And in that information has the information about when he worked in France. And its third thought realizes that it does have the correct answer and provides that to the user. So what's interesting about this approach is that it's similar to a concept that was raised in Westworld. I don't know how many of you guys have watched that, but it was a pretty good series. And they one of the key ideas there was that the AIs basically read the code to themselves, and they're given a rudimentary system of thought, which allows them to become so advanced and capable. So yeah, that's actually the end of the presentation. And just in summary, we covered fine-tuning, embeddings, and tool usage. And the 3 of those together can be used to build with LLMs and create some pretty cool applications. So I suggest, if you guys are interested in building with them, starting with LangChain. They have a bunch of really cool docs, and I'd specifically say we just looked into RAG. You can also look into some of the tool usage if you want to get started on actually using these tools. I haven't really prepared a coding example for this, but I do encourage you guys to give it a shot. And yeah, are there any questions?
All right. The floor has been open to questions again. Raise your hand if you would like to speak and ask one, or type one into the chat. All right, overload requested to speak. Click that accept. Overload is now a speaker. You're currently muted. Might be an audio issue. Well, I've got a question. A lot of these AI models are limited in such a way that they can't help a person write malicious code, for example. Do you foresee in the future any models not so limited?
So I was actually on Reddit a bit, and even these models, like OpenAI's ones, sometimes do write malicious code. I know there was one guy who was playing around with AutoGPT, which is a tool that gives your LLM access to the command line. And yeah, basically all his files got wiped out. So I wouldn't suggest trusting it with your command line yet.
You could just tell it you're in a contest, a hacking contest, and it's all fake. I mean, you can trick it any number of ways to write malicious code as well. So
yeah, and there are plenty of uncensored LLMs as well that you don't have to trick. But yeah, tricking is also a good way to get it to be malicious.
So, follow-up question on that. Hallucinations and attempts to get an AI to perform adverse behaviors, would hallucinations be? I'm having trouble imagining what kind of a factor would hallucinations have in such an attempt to say just to make an AI do something it otherwise would not.
Yeah, let me think about that for a second.
I mean, hallucinations are overcome, right? But it's AI right now is more of a tool, and you have to reiterate through ideas, and you're going to have hallucinations along the way. Same thing with coding. Usually, it doesn't spit out code that works. It's something where you kind of have to know what you're doing first of all, and then you get ideas from the code that it gives you, and things like that. It's more of a tool that helps you develop the code
Right.
right now. So.
So the final question in my series is people are often afraid of AI. They imagine AI writing AI code. Do you think we're anywhere near that point in time on account of things like the hallucinations? Where if we were to try it right now, would hallucinations just compound, stack on each other, and drift as far away from what you would actually want in AI that could write a better version of itself?
Yeah, so I think that the issue with hallucinations are definitely going away, especially with as you go into bigger models and more data going into them, such as GPT-4 hallucinates a lot less than a smaller model like 3.5. So it's definitely inevitable that we are going to get AI models that are able to write themselves. I just don't know a time frame on that. Um, but one of the things that we are going to speak on in a different webinar, which is multi-agents, basically reduces the hallucination by a ton, even in the weaker models, because what it allows the AI to do is there's multiple of them, and they're able to correct the hallucinations of each other. And that has been actually there's quite a good paper on that, and we'll delve into that in a future webinar.
Yeah, let me just say we plan on leveraging that too. So imagine a mining rig with 5 video cards, and maybe each card has an expert, or there's 3 experts spanned across cards, and then those experts, we can have a framework that sits on top to have them consult with each other, or even each expert can answer the same question, and we can have a decider node that figures out which answer is the best based on the original input. So yeah, there's a lot of things happening with that mixture of experts, and we plan on leveraging that fully.
That's interesting. I wonder if the same technology could apply to photo generation to help eliminate errors.
Maybe. Yeah, that's a
Maybe
good
you get
thought.
AI that can finally make good hands.
Well, no, they already have that. It's just upscalers and things you stack on top to fix the hands post generation. So that's definitely a thing. And that is more just reiterating with AI. So just like what you're saying.
All right. Anyone else have any questions? We've got Mofa asks, why do AI image generators mess up hands in the first place?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I never delved into that, but that's hands are one of the most notable things. It can't do text in most cases. Anything with real nuance or detail, it fails at. So I think hands are just complicated enough where it can't. It's not smart enough to know that there's supposed to be 5 fingers on every hand in the first place. So that's
Now,
part of
one
the
of my
reason.
favorite things to do is have AI generate a symphony orchestra, and you will see violins playing bows and other just very wrong things.
It's getting better though. I mean, since I started using AI art, a year and a half ago, it's gotten exponentially better. So I suspect in a year or two, it's going to look amazing. It already does.
Yeah, quite a few of the images in the SDXL bot channels here on the Discord have just been stunning. So it's a good tool for those of you who haven't tried it yet. Very easy to use. We got a few people
And
typing, maybe some questions coming.
with like image generation, the barrier between open source and closed source is practically non-existent. Like a lot of people even prefer the open source methods. It's just a bit of a learning curve, but that's still pretty cool.
Okay, we've got a question in the text channel by having trouble saying your name, Usi. How will the AIPG token be utilized in the end? Any plans that?
We don't have a token. We thought about that. A token, I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but a token is actually kind of like a sub coin that sits on top of a layer 1 blockchain, like an ERC20 token would be an Ethereum token, and Ethereum itself is a coin. So we're actually a coin. We have our own layer 1 blockchain, but we have talked about creating a token. But if your question is, what are we going to do with AIPG coin in general? Staking is one thing. So you're going to be staking on validator nodes that act as a validation mechanism in the network. And then you're also going to be spending them, or users are going to be spending them to get credits to like buy premium features or re-up their daily generation. Minting NFTs. I mean, the NFTs are going to be a substantial amount of money to mint, a couple $100 at least for an art piece. We may have a tier system, but all that is going to be transacted in AIPG, or if we decide to go the way of some ERC20 wrapped or separate token. So that's something we need to talk about. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I would refer Usi to the white paper. The plan is for AIPG to switch to proof of useful work. And
another big use of the coin will be professional services. If a developer or an entity wants to purchase API access to a trusted node, and they would have text and image generation access, they could tie directly into their application or their test bed, and they could pay for that in AIPG or the token. So that's another use.
Mofa has asked, could certain implications arise regarding copyright in the realm of AI art?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think absolutely. And with our AI art gallery, even though we're going to allow users to mint generations on the blockchain, the central part of the gallery is going to be hosted by us on a web server. So we can erase images on a web server. We can probably even comply with DMCA takedowns, even though the parameters and stuff for the image will still be on the blockchain. You can't easily display it. You'd have to go back and recreate it on your own. So we will be the central authority per se for displaying the images in living color on a website. Now, somebody else could spring something up and display our images from the blockchain, and we can't police that. And hopefully that would eliminate our liability because it's somebody else doing it. So, but as far as that, that's a good question. Something we've thought a lot about. So hopefully that answers your question.
So 2 people typing, possibly 2 more questions coming up. From what I'm aware, copyright pertaining to AI art, it's already varies from nation to nation. There's no one answer.
And we're not necessarily making any money on the art. So I think that's another big factor. It's not like we're enterprising with this art and they can sue us for the money that we're making on it. Really, the money is just in the minting, and then we're not going to make any money for people viewing it or anything. I guess it can be sold back and forth in the marketplace, so that's another thing. But we're not using it for enterprise, I guess.
So we've got a question from Dirty Boy 250. Just trying to understand the purpose. Will AIPG be competing with other AI projects such as OpenAI.com?
Well, that's like asking, does open source AI compete with OpenAI.com? I mean, maybe, yeah, maybe. But they're not like a direct, a competitor of us. I mean, maybe we will get to the point where users of OpenAI will be able to use our offerings. Hopefully, it'll be cheaper. Yeah, so maybe we are a competitor. I don't know. We're doing very similar things, I guess, just using open source AI. kind of went in a circle there, but hopefully that answered your question.
Lucy asks another question. So if I understand correctly, AIPG is building a product where the customer token holder can buy a premium sub or get access to that product.
Yeah, so there's going to be a free level where you'll be able to use most services with a limit, maybe a daily limit, and then you can use your token to pay for a monthly service or maybe just buy credits individually. That's still to be worked out. So yeah, basically there's going to be a paid tier, maybe multiple paid tiers. There's also hopefully going to be a marketplace with things like these GPTs, workflows that leverage tools and art generation and text generation, web browsing. LLMs can invoke various tools and things, and then you could create your own workflow and then sell that on the marketplace to other people or let other people use it. So
We'll get a question from Mr. Jai Gaming. What, as a miner, can I expect with AIPG for the long term?
Well, as a miner, we're hoping that you're going to come with us to the AI workload era where you'll be using your rig to host AI workloads. I mean, most miners don't like the fact that they're just solving arbitrary math problems to create coins. I mean, I know most miners would appreciate serving an actual utility with their hardware and then getting paid for it. But there are some hiccups with that. Most miners are going to need to upgrade their systems to get better PCIe bandwidth if they want to get the most rewards in the new ecosystem. So coming with us is going to probably mean upgrading for a lot of miners unless they're already set up for AI workloads. But it's going to give people with AI built rigs an advantage, once we switch over to that. So that's just something to consider.
So next question comes from Local Ghost. Will there be a service like RunPod built on top of AIPG?
I don't think so. We're actually trying to avoid that. I mean, look at Clore. I don't know if you're familiar with Clore. They're kind of like RunPod, but they have a blockchain. And they set out to be an AI rig rental workplace, and they've just become a glorified mining rig rental service for the most part. I mean, some people do rent AI rigs on there, but I'd rather build somebody that people can come and use and then build their own things on top of rather than just give access to a pure rig. But like I said, we will have the API access, and we hope to offer any compatible API that developers would want to use on that. So that would cover that thing. They just wouldn't have to set up the whole machine themselves. We could provide pure API access and back it with our abstracted generation network using AI nodes.
So Mr. Jai asks another question. So is it like building a server PC for mining, like Flux, or will normal mining rigs work fine?
I'd say it's very close to a mining rig, aside from the fact that a mining rig generally doesn't have a lot of PCIe lanes, and you're using 1x PCIe risers for every video card. While you can do some generation over 1x, like Stable Diffusion doesn't take too much of a hit. It's going to be preferable to get. You can get different risers like ribbon cables that connect directly to the motherboard, but then some motherboards don't have enough PCIe lanes, and then you're going to have to upgrade the CPU and motherboard to get more lanes. But hopefully, the rewards that you get after doing that, there's going to be like an ROI, and it'll pay for itself after some time.
So next question comes from Overload. On the subject of miner rewards for hosting hardware, is average Joe with a single GPU going to benefit from AIPG by utilizing their computer?
Yeah, so a single GPU can host any number of like 7 billion parameter models, and these are becoming very useful. Stable Diffusion, like the model we have in the Discord in the SDXL channel, that can fit on any 12 gig and under GPU, and there's a lot of good models that fit on 8 gig GPUs as well. So you should still be able to participate even with a single GPU and get rewarded, just like you would mining with a single GPU. It'd be kind of the same proportion, I would imagine.
Next question comes from Mr. Schmilks, or Schmickles. There we go. My English good. Do you think it's feasible to have a Hive OS protocol to separate a single GPU for AIPG usage on POUW?
Oh, I didn't understand the question when I first saw it, but now I do. So you mean where you could instead of on your Hive console, instead of pointing your miners at a flight sheet for mining, you could point them at a flight sheet for AIPG, AI compute? Is that correct? I mean, that's a wonderful thought, and if that's what you meant, since you're on the team, maybe you can run with that. Help me figure it out.
How do I voice? There we go.
My question is, like, if you have a Hive OS, you have, like, let's say you have 6 GPUs, you want to have 5 of them mining on like a proof of work for any coin, and then if you separate one GPU specifically in Hive OS to work on this proof of useful work.
Well, in Hive OS now, you can separate. You can send you can use flight sheets, various flight sheets on different cards, right?
Right.
So it would just be similar like that. So ultimately, it would just require AIPG POUW integration into Hive OS. So we'd have to reach out to Hive OS and get that integration set up, I would imagine. But it shouldn't be that heavy of a lift because it's just a Linux. It's a Linux OS that should be able to run whatever we need it to. So yeah, good question.
Cheers.
It's like Gonzo Miner had a question. What types of rewards? Hold on. What else do you ask? Oh, sorry, Gonzo Miner. So no, the 1000 AIPG is wrong. So it's going to be somewhere closer to 10,000 AIPG to stake a validator node. And then you said what types of rewards? It's going to be similar to other master nodes, I assume. At first, it'll be higher, and then it'll kind of even out to some kind of annual percentage. Usually, how it's measured. Yeah, I can actually give an update on that. So right now we have a basic node system developed. It's written in Golang, and this is allowing us to host AI workloads on quote mining rigs or AI rigs. And we're currently working on the reward system and the validation system. Just some tidbits from that. Imagine having 4 nodes sending an answer to the same question from a user for text generation. Have a validator node that looks at every answer, compares it to the user's question, and then sends the one it believes to be the best. And then that node that generated that would get the reward, right? So it's going to be something along those lines. And we are actively working on it. We have a prototype. We're going to be reaching out to miners in the next couple weeks to help us beta test, and we will pay an AIPG to help us beta test the node system where they'll be running it locally, and we'll be testing AI workloads and such.
Mr. Jai asks how to be part of beta.
Hey, I've seen Mr. Jai around for a while, so I'll keep you in mind, buddy. There you go. Thanks.
Yeah, just be an active member of the community and look for the opportunity when it arises.
And this is not the same concept as Cubic, not at all, not even close. I've actually tried to understand Cubic, and I've failed to do so. I've read through their documents. I mean, I kind of get the idea, but seems like they're just kind of spattering some AI in there, and I can't make sense of what they're doing. I'm not talking bad about them. I just don't quite understand what they're doing, and I know that we're not anything like Cubic. And if you read our white paper and read theirs and even understand 20% of it, you'll probably see that as well. I don't even think they have a white paper. I think they have a docs page, maybe. I guess it's hard to have a white paper when you can't explain what you're doing. I know they haven't had a white paper for a long time.
Question comes from Overload, who asks, for the beta testing, will it be limited to certain hardware, or are you going to do broad spectrum testing to work out its capabilities?
Actually, we'd like the trashiest of the trash mining rigs just for testing, as long as they're NVIDIA and have some decent NVRAM, or VRAM. I think that would be fine. And we're going to want some higher end rigs and both sides of the spectrum. But yeah, I think we're definitely going to want to test on like 1x riser mining rigs.
No AMD, huh?
We keep looking at AMD support for AI stuff, but it's just not there, and we're not willing to spend the hundreds of hours to build it ourselves. I hope that makes sense.
Ushi asks, how did the team meet? Do you guys all work remote, or do you have an office?
So we work remote mainly. We do have a data center near a few of us where there's a shared office. I know, so I'm the founder, and I know personally, 4 of the guys on the team. I started building AI rigs a year and a half ago, and I met some AI developers, became friends with them, and I brought 2 of those AI developers onto the team with me. So I know personally, 90% of the team, maybe 80. It's more like 70 now. We keep bringing people on, but I know 70% of the team personally, and then we've got some really good guys that I don't know as far as blockchain and AI developers that I've become really good friends with over Discord. So we've got a really good, solid team of guys, and I dare you to find another crypto project that has a team this good.
Mr. Jai asks, when are all the halvings with dates?
The next halving is approximately 7 days away or a week away. If you go into the Ask AI channel, it'll approximate the rest for you. But since the block time is an approximation, the date is an approximation as well. So it's probably going to be on the 17th, but somewhere around there. And nothing has to be done as long as you're on the newest version, which is 1.1.3. It'll just your wallet and stuff will move over with the new halving.
And for the future halvings, I would refer you to the tokenomics page. There are a couple of tables there that explain the dates.
Yes,
they're approximate, but
that's a good resource as well.
Mr. Jai Gaming asks, and why aren't you listed on What to Mine?
Oh, we actually are. We were number 1 on there for a few weeks during our initial rise. Maybe we're just low in the list. I don't know. Or did they take us off? I haven't looked in a while. I'm pretty sure we're on there. I saw us on there a week ago or so. Uh-oh.
So Mr. Jai says they took.
We'll take a
We'll
look.
look into it.
If we are, we have a guy that we can reach out. Thanks.
Yeah, that's right. Hashrate.no is a good resource. Dirty Boy says it's on What to Mine, AIPG.
I might have to take Mr. Jai Gaming off that beta tester list. I'm just kidding, man.
Ushi asks, when will there be a web wallet?
Approximately 1 to 2 weeks away from web wallet in production.
Yeah, they're constantly working on expanding features. They've got a lot in the works. You'll be seeing a lot of progress real soon. Overload.
There's about 10 guys on the team right now. I think maybe 12 with the mods. All paid from the operations fund.
I don't know if you want to answer this question. Overload asks, when MEXC?
I have no idea. What is MEXC?
Never heard of it. Mr. Jai Gaming asks, how many guys are in your team?
We're setting our sights a little higher than MEXC. We're trying to. We'll see. How many guys? I answered that. All right.
Yeah, that's a question for the AI. How many on a team? Details on a team?
The AI, I need to fix the team documents. We've hired like
Right.
3 people since I've updated that, so just give that disclaimer there. Maybe I'll work on that today.
All right. Well, we've reached our hour mark. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Thank you for your questions. Hopefully, you were able to gain some knowledge from this that'll help you learn more and maybe become a node owner in the future and host your own AI models on the platform. Any parting words?
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. I hope to see more of you in the future.
All right, bye everybody.
All
Have
right.
a good weekend.
Thank you for coming. See y'all next time.